Welcome to A New View. We are so glad you've joined us. If you don't know who we are Restored Ministries. I am Michelle Ballum, and this is my lovely team, Stephanie Wannick and Kim Weingart. We bring you 3 shows every week on the Kingdom Broadcasting Network, and we hope that you're enjoying them. And we also hope that you come out to our Facebook page and share your view of A New View. Today we're going to be talking about maybe some life lessons this week, but the first episode we're talking about is training up a child. We're not parenting experts.
No.
We are just real moms sharing some real stories, some real nuggets, real information with you about our journey of healing, of becoming maybe some better moms. Maybe we're still trying to figure it out, but we wanted to share some things of how we felt that maybe training up a child, but also we're big kids too.
That's right.
You know, we need these.
We're all kids at heart. We still have tons of lessons to learn.
Absolutely.
Well, and even if you don't have any kids, or your kids are out of the house for 20 years now, it's all really good information. You're going to
Still learning.
It's good because not only are they just applicable in parenting or in, they're all relationships.
Every
Yeah.
relationship,
And we all
yes.
have to deal with people and relationships.
We all have to deal with people. People have to deal with us.
True.
This is good stuff, though. I'm excited we're doing this, and I'm glad you're explaining that. Especially if if we're not still raising children in our home. Once you have a child, they're always your child. But I feel like as we've raised our kids or are raising them, things pop up for us on what things we believed when we were children, or what we learned, or maybe events or instances that we've gone through. And I know for me, like different things that I've seen Sophia walk through have shown reflections of, well, how did I handle that when I was a child? Or how would I have handled that as a child? And it helps you kind of have more perspective. So I think today's a good show too about, having different perspective on what our kids go through and maybe what we've gone through. So I'm excited for us.
Exactly. And some of us maybe grew up parenting ourselves. We maybe didn't have strong parental influences, or we came from broken homes or things like that we didn't really know. We kind of like taught ourselves until till we knew better. But this morning I found this quote. It was actually, and it says, teaching children to count is not as important as teaching them what counts. And that's really for all of us, because I think as we age and as we grow, we find out what counts is not what we thought it was.
Yeah.
And then there was another thing there that I thought was a beautiful reflection as my children are getting older, almost 19 now. I think, it says the work will wait while you show your children the rainbow, but the rainbow will not wait while you do the work.
Yeah.
And then I thought, oh, that's so true, because there were so many times when my children were younger that I thought, oh, we have to do, and maybe miss that opportunity. So as a mom now of college kids, I'm really learning to stop, to do that holy pause, that holy hush that we were talking about last week, but just to really pause and to say, let me breathe in every bit of this moment.
Yeah.
Of everything.
Yeah, and that does take a pause. It takes like a physical pause, and then I think it takes kind of a spiritual pause for us, having an awareness of that we need to slow down. Like I'm the same way, because I get in my I need to do this, and this while my kids are at school today, and I'm learning as different things will pop up or things that I didn't plan for. I'll have to ask questions like, okay, well, is this a priority for me? Or how important is this? Or just different things. And I think we deal with that as moms. We deal with that in our marriages. We deal with that in our friendships even. So I love those. Those are really good.
And we're all God's children. So again, he says, train up a child. So Stephanie, I know you had some stuff on Proverbs 22:6.
So that verse, I'm sure a lot of you have heard before. I know it became kind of one that I looked at quite a bit as a mama, or as I am a mama, and our kids go to Christian school, so they talked about this verse at school, and I've heard it from school. And so in my Bible it does read, teach your children to choose the right path, and when they are older they will remain upon it. And a lot of people read that scripture as if you teach your kids about God, this is a guarantee that they will not move from that. But I personally don't read it that way, and only because I've done the study and the research on it, and it's even taught that way. But we do have to study God's word, and we do have to ask the Holy Spirit and even have conversation about it. But if you look at it in that way, it does take out the free will of your child, which
Right.
I think is still governed by God, but it is still there. They still have free will.
Right.
Not free will while they're not much free will while they're still in our home and little and in diapers, or even, you know, going to school or whatever. But I love the notes in this because I think it does answer some of the question I had with this verse and when different people would talk about what it means. So I'm going to just read the notes in this. In the process of helping our children choose the right path, we must discern differing paths for each child. It's natural to want to bring up all of our children alike or train them in the same way. This verse implies that parents should discern the individuality and special strengths that God has given each one. While we should not condone or excuse self-will, each child has natural inclinations that parents can develop. By talking to teachers, other parents, and grandparents, we can better discern and develop the individual capabilities of each child. So when I've read this verse and studied it in different ways, I've heard the word bend with it, that each child has their own bend.
Right.
And as a parent, that's part of our responsibility and kind of part of our joy in finding what that is for each child. And I know you guys can relate to this, like just learning not to compare each one of your kids. And I know with you being a twin and even having twins, like I know that's got to have been something that you've looked at as well.
With that, yeah.
Yeah, and even like our kids are boy and girl, and they're almost 5 years apart. You would think you wouldn't do that as much, but I've caught myself doing that. I mean, I caught myself doing that when Hunter first entered preschool, and his teacher told me, you know, you can't compare them. And she was absolutely right. You know, I was comparing how he was adjusting to how my daughter did.
Right.
And that is a good lesson. That is a life lesson for us to learn, you know, as parents, or even as, you know, not comparing yourself to other people, but as a parent too, not comparing your children, or if you do, you know, not to verbalize that in front of them necessarily,
and I
and
think
to pray on it.
It's a very natural thing to make a comparison in the respect that the only way you can assess something is to go, what do I know about this? Well, I know what happened with my first child. So don't beat yourself up when you do it, but catch yourself and make sure it's not verbalized and the kids don't realize that you're doing it.
That's really good, because you can only go off what you've known first, you know. I mean, like I make jokes and say, you know, my husband and I had this little bitty Dachshund dog, Cinnamon, was my little baby for 15 years, but she was only a few years old when we had Curran and Connor. And so whenever we had the twins, it's like, all I knew was this little Dachshund dog, and then I got thrown into double whammy, you know, and it was overwhelming. But I loved what you just said about a natural bend, because even us as big kids, we all have a natural bend. And so many times people will want us to change our natural bend
their way.
To bend their way. And sometimes we do have to compromise and things like that, but it's never wanting to break someone's natural bend, because that's how God gifted us naturally.
Yeah, that's true. That's good. And I also think of the words shepherding, like we're shepherding our children's hearts. Well, the Lord is shepherding our hearts. And so I looked up the word shepherding because I do love that word. And you have other words like guide or steer, direct, or give guidance. And in my notes I said, it's really not being bossy or controlling. Or we've had Marina on the show before, and I can remember having conversations with Marina. And again, she's like, I love her because she really breaks things down for me. I remember talking to her, and she was telling me, not just in regards to parenting, but I am applying this to parenting, asking myself questions like, well, am I parenting out of fear or out of faith? And that fear would be in regards to parenting. Am I parenting out of the fear of my kids making bad choices, or maybe choices that I don't want for them? Or am I parenting out of the faith that they're going to do what's best, or they'll do what's best and learn from their mistakes? And mind you, my kids are already smaller. Or Hunter's only 7, but I think about all these things just because I know how I was parented, and I know, you know, how that affected me. And you just look at your life, and we'll sometimes make jokes like, oh gosh, I don't want to turn into my mother, or what. And that's not a bad thing. You know, it just depends on your situation. But we ask ourselves, I think, those questions as women, like, ooh, my mom used to do that, or oh, where did I learn that from? And I don't think it's necessarily ever bad to ask those questions. So.
Well, I mean, in my life too, though, I came from a broken home, and so, I I had, various, step parents in my life. And then I also had a paternal grandmother that, we kind of talked about.
Yeah.
She didn't always have the best, character to model after. But I also know that a lot of her parenting style and their parenting styles was the fault finding, what we talked about last week. But also I know that I was kind of a negative, cruel taskmaster of a mother for many years. And then when I stopped doing, phony religion, what I called it, and really had a deep relationship and really sought to change my life and live by a biblical worldview, my kids were old enough to know the shift of how we used to live and how we are living for the Lord. And I remember that the realization, and I did this thing about Proverbs. I had read something, if you read a Proverbs a day, it says, there's some funny little things that say Proverbs a day keeps destruction away, or Proverbs a day will help set you the right way and things. And so I had laminated this sheet of all these different Proverbs that I loved, for my children. And I really tried to find it for this show because I know that they had it plastered in their rooms for years and things. But when we remodeled, we did a lot of cleaning out. But I know I didn't model. I parented how I saw. And it was kind of like the fault finding. It was a very gruff. It was a cruel taskmaster. Like, you got to do, this whole perfection mentality. But really, when I allowed them to find their own niche, not doing things the way I necessarily said to do it, I can guide them, but letting them find their own. And really impressing upon them that in God's word, he has some great things for us. And so the central theme of Proverbs is the wisdom of God. And it says his wisdom is parted upon his people by his spirit, the spirit of wisdom. It says without the spirit of wisdom, folly and destruction can overcome us. With wisdom, the richest blessings of God's spirits are available to all of his people. So God's spirit breathed into the Proverbs of Solomon, the riches of God's wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And so I started looking at Proverbs again as preparing for this show, and right away Proverbs 2:11 says discretion will preserve you, understanding will keep you. And so I was really thinking, like, maybe I should start reading a Proverbs a day again. And then of course we all know Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him and he will direct your paths.
That's
and then one. Proverbs 4:7 said wisdom is principle, therefore get wisdom, and with all you're getting, get understanding. And then I thought I was trying to break that down, and I started thinking about discernment, discerning. And it says, when we get the wisdom, when we get the spiritual wisdom and the understanding, we are able to discern between good and evil. We're able to discern between right and wrong. It went on, I think, in the commentary of my Bible, from angels between demons, from wise people to foolish people. So Proverbs was a great way to kind of start that, but we landed on Proverbs 4:23 and 4:23 and Proverbs 23:7 were exactly talking about what we've been talking a lot about lately. Is Proverbs 4:23 was keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. And then Proverbs 23:7, for as he thinks in his heart, so is he. And I was thinking about that because as my kids are in college and they're getting opinions from their professors and different things like that, they're varying opinions from what we taught them or what they even believe in different things. And sometimes they'll be real quick to like kind of judge that situation or be a little overly critical. And I'm like, hey, we got to step back. Not everybody's going to think the same way. But if you're saying those things, you got to check your heart. You're being a little prideful, you're being a little critical, you're bringing a little judgment. And I really started thinking about so many things that are in our hearts. Not just things that we've learned as a child that's been there, but just, the lies that we've bought into, the opinions, that things that are thrown at us. I started thinking about, wow, we collect a lot of things in our hearts. So a lot of times our mouths do reflect those things that we haven't dealt with. And Cindy Trim actually had this little quote, and it was, there's always an inner cause for every outer effect. Your outer world is a direct result of your inner world. So that's why our hearts and minds and words need to align. There's that word again, with God. So I started thinking like if we align ourselves and helping our children to align with the Word of God, and getting in that helps us to get rid of the inner stuff that maybe is a direct result of the outer junk and things. So that's what I kind of was just kind of percolating on Proverbs there, and that made me think about that, and thinking about so many things we learn are from our outside.
Yeah.
Our outside, and that's true. Even us today, sometimes we can see some things and it can maybe shift our perspective a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And I'm just going to go through this quick little list because Kim, I know you have some really good stuff to share. You were talking about the heart and then what comes out of our mouth, as a result, what we're saying because of what's in there. And I had made some notes about, I started thinking about the things that we're trying to teach our kids and things that we want to live by too. And it's just stuff like being honest, obviously respectful, having personal responsibility, being kind and considerate, be thankful. And we like to put our kids in different settings like sports to build their confidence, the importance of constructive rebuke, leaning into disciplining. But I put a little note that a lot of the honest, respectful, personal responsibility, the kind, all those things, I put a lot of this happens with our mouths. Right. We do those things with our mouths, with our words, with the things we're saying, with the things we're not saying. So I'm asked, I was like, well, what are we saying? So you're absolutely right. You have to check your heart, and how do you teach your children to do that? That's something, it's like teaching them a daily practice of when you pray, confessing some of what's gone on in that day and getting that off your chest, or having a parent or a loved one that you can share that stuff with. I know we talked about, I feel now more than ever, I have to check my heart. Different things are coming in, and I'm so aware of when something is coming, and I feel like I'm grieving the Holy Spirit, and it's like, okay, it's time to get it out, girlfriend, because we let that stuff build up. Yeah. And you're right, it comes out, and if it doesn't, that's almost even worse. Both are bad, but letting it just grow and then stifle and stuff, all
Make
of that.
You sick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think I remember real quick before Kim starts this, I remember a situation one time where I knew a person's son had done a horrific event, and my sister and I were talking about it, and I remember being so saddened and thought, how could this child have done this? What was in this child's heart that would make them do this horrific event? And my sister just kind of had a really funny kind of knee-jerk reaction, and she was just like, she couldn't see the deeper thing. Yeah. And she was just kind of like, no, he did this bad thing, psh, hands done with it. But I love how God is so merciful with us, because I think that was probably about 10 years ago. That's when God really started saying, look at the heart, and gave me a compassion to say, because I used to watch news and I used to say, oh, how could anybody ever forgive them? Oh my gosh, they did a horrible thing, and I can't even watch news now. But when I really shifted and started looking at news and thinking, gosh, I wonder what was in that person's heart that would make them feel they had to do that. Yeah. And it's really having that compassion for that. And in my own heart, because it took me a long time to check my heart, Yeah.
That reminds me of the recent anniversary of the Sandy Hook murders.
Yes.
That the one mom of the little boy had said, looking back, of course, we're praying, the children, the murderer, what was in his heart? And he was a child at some, he was a child anyway. I mean, he wasn't that old to whatever degree, but what was he missing?
Yeah.
It's sad. It's really sad.
Oh, that was a great interview too.
It was good.
Where she talked about the forgiveness and cutting the line to,
And actually, I think that's a great lesson probably for anyone, that if someone can lose their child in such a horrific way, to be able to see that parent can look at the other side and have some compassion.
Yeah.
That's a good life lesson for everyone at every age. There's a few personal lessons that I've enjoyed from different people over time, and one was from Oprah. I can't remember who was on the show or if she was the one that said it or not, but when people tell you who they are, believe them.
Yeah.
Same thing as what you're speaking is coming out of your heart. That's exactly, I guess, what that is. And then I love you learn everything you really need to know about life in kindergarten. You learn to take turns. That's
true.
It teaches us courtesy and sharing our time, whether it's a task we want or an item that we want to play with or something we have to do, whether you're sharing a chore or whatever it is. It's just courtesy for the other people in the situation.
That's right. They need like kindergarten 101 for big kids sometimes. I'm thinking too, because that's true.
Some of us
true.
skip kindergarten.
I had an old boss, and there was some stuff going on corporate-wise, and everybody was like, what are they thinking? They don't know what they're doing. And he's like, anytime you come across something and you're like, this makes no sense whatsoever, why would anybody do that? There's something you don't know.
Oh, that's a
And
good
so
point.
that's judgment we're looking
That's
at, right?
true. That's good.
It's, there's something
Yeah.
I don't know. I really can't speak effectively on that because I'm going to sound like the idiot because there's
Yeah.
something I don't know and I think I know
That's
everything.
good.
That is good.
And then there's another one. My friend Anne sent me a book called Better Than Before by Gretchen Rubin. And it's got, I think, a huge vital step in any lesson is knowing who you are, because if you don't know where to start from, you don't know where you're going. And so
good.
Gretchen has in her book a suggestion to write your personal commandments.
Ooh, that's
And
good.
it really, this is your guidance to live by. So I have 6 for myself, and I stole the first one from her, and mine is be Kim Weingart. And that's my first one because it's my most important. I look back at my life, and anytime I had any regret or disappointment, I was either doing something or not doing something that was not true to myself.
That's good.
Okay.
That's good.
So
You
my
do know
sec-
yourself
I
then,
do, I've learned-
for you to recognize
That's
that.
good.
Yeah.
Well, and the
that's-
book is really helpful, so better than before. But my second one is act the way I want to feel. Y'all know in the last couple years I've had some medical stuff or some injuries, and I'm not going to sit around on the couch like, oh, I'm in pain. I'm going to act the way I want to feel. I'm going to try to, and hopefully it heads that way. The third one is identify the problem. So
Right.
many times we spin on stuff and we don't
Yeah.
figure it out, and you can't fix it if you don't know what you're dealing with.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And this one is good. Let it go. Number 4,
Yes.
let it go.
Let it go.
Gotta let it go. 5 is enjoy the process. And again, I think this is kind of a mom thing when you're struggling through whatever it is, life, just whatever. Your kids see that. So if you just
Yeah.
try to go through it with a little bit of grace, looks
Yeah.
like you enjoy the process maybe.
I love that.
And 6, I might be a procrastinator. I don't know if I'm committing to that term, but because I'm procrastinating on the commitment of that. But
Right.
but number 6 for me is do it now. Whatever it is,
That's a
just
good
get it done
one.
now. Because if I set it down, I'm going to pick it up later and go, put it back down. I'm
Yeah.
probably going to pick it up again later. Just get it done.
Just
Yeah.
do
Makes
it
my
now,
life
yeah.
easier.
Yeah.
It
So
does.
those
Those
are
are
my
really
list.
good, and
I
I
love your
love
list.
us making the personal commandments. You're going to have to share those when you do that, when you share the
Yeah, that's
replay
good.
links online for this show. But I love that so much because personal commandments, that's really a great thing too, as we're talking about training up a child in life lessons, sharing that with our kids. What are your personal commandments? What are things that you really right now think this is what makes me who I am, and
Yeah.
what can I do to make better? When we're all in job interviews, I'm thinking of, in the corporate world, we would always ask the question when I was in the corporate world in management, and I would have interviews and I would ask people, what are your greatest strengths, and what are your greatest weaknesses? Okay. If they, list all these greatest strengths, but then you get to their weaknesses and they don't have anything, you're like, there's a little pause, for
Yeah.
concern and things. And I remember being in an interview and the person said something along the lines that said, I have a lot of weaknesses, but I'm willing to learn how to overcome them. And I remember that
that's
stood
good.
out to me. And that was years ago, but
Yeah.
that's really how we live authentic.
Yeah.
That's really how we
Yeah.
live our personal commandments when
Yeah.
we say, I have these list of weaknesses, but I'm willing to learn how I can do them differently.
Yeah, and it reminds me of my husband and I are real big on we've talked to our kids about having grit, like what that looks like and what that even means. And you can't really, and I could be completely wrong, this is just my opinion, but I can't teach my kids to have grit.
Right.
I can show them or give them examples of what give them a definition, give them stories of what grit looked like in this situation, and also allow them to be in situations where they're learning what that means, or putting them in situations where they're having to dig deep. It's
Right,
basically
right.
digging deep.
Right. And also, I
And-
think grit grit, I think, is like follow through. Keeping your word, because that's a thing I've really taught my kids. I mean, you keep your word. They had situations over time where they had a friend, this is a classic thing, and big kids do this too, where they will commit to doing an event or hanging out with you, so to say, but then they get a better offer. And then they'll just be like, nope, sorry, I'm gonna bail on you and this and that. And I tell my kids, I said, you can't ditch someone for a better opportunity if you've given your word. You have to give your word. Now, that's not always to say is to go to them humbly and say, please forgive me.
I was going to say, add
please forgive
honesty
me.
to
I
that.
have this,
being
this,
honest.
that. But, be honest.
Yes.
But if you're a constant person that is ditching your vows, flaking out, ditching your vows, not holding up to your word, that's integrity problem. That's not living in moral excellence.
And it's good. It's a good thing of that. And that is another thing where you can tell your kids or tell people all about it, but they got to do the work in it. They've got to go through different situations where you tell them, hey, you said you were going to do this, so you need to follow through. And grit is something too where I just like the fact that where you can teach your kids everything is not going to be easy. You're not going to get everything. You're not going to get it first. You might not get it the third time. You may never reach what you're going for. But the process of struggling through that or working through that, that's grit. And you are more successful gaining and working and getting that grit than you may ever be getting the one thing that you've been working so hard for. That's been the funnest thing I've learned from Jeff.
You had something about the process. Enjoy the process. There's a thing online that I love. They have little great encouraging images. The Grit and Grace Project.
Oh yeah, I posted something from there. I saw it.
I
You
like
did too.
their stuff. I followed them for a while. I think they're on
those
Instagram.
words together.
But I do. I love that whole thing, Grit and Grace Project, because that's really how we go about through life. There are going to be things in life that we're going to have some grit to get through, and that we're going to have to teach our children and things for that grit. But there's also a lot of things in life that we got to have the grace for.
Absolutely.
We got to have grace. So I love how both of them. So we're wrapping up this first episode this week on Train Up a Child. We're just real moms sharing some of our real stories of real healing and of how we can either help ourselves with life lessons, help our children, help relationships. So you don't have to be a parent, because we all have people we have to deal with at times. So we're all going to need to get these lessons for life lessons. Stay tuned this week for episode 2. And we thank you again for joining A New View each and every week. Take care.